Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into this Baltimore housing dispute, and it's really not as simple as it might seem at first glance. We're going to be talking about, you know, property lines and whether those overlap with racial lines, tax breaks that, well, they come with some strings attached, and a whole lot of he said, she said.
Yeah.
That's going to leave you wondering what's really going on.
Sounds like a job for us, right? To kind of untangle this whole thing.
You got it. So we're dealing with a homeowner, Nicholas Miles, and he filed this discrimination complaint
Mm-hmm.
against, well, it's a mouthful, Historic East Baltimore Community Action Coalition, Inc. They go by HEBCAC, thankfully.
Thank goodness for acronyms, right?
Right. And also against Eager Street Development. Basically, Miles is saying that HEBCAC treated him differently because of his race, especially when it came to a Maryland Historic Tax Credit Agreement.
Right.
And, those home warranty repairs that everyone dreads.
Yeah, but this isn't just a story about one unhappy homeowner. When we dig into this, we see this bigger picture about this housing project, Station East in East Baltimore, and it might reveal some deeper problems.
Okay, so Station East, they were renovating these old houses and then selling them to people living in Baltimore, often at a discount. Sounds pretty good so far. So what went wrong?
Well, you see that discount, that's where this Maryland Historic Tax Credit Agreement comes in. Homeowners got a lower price, sure, but then they had to send the money they got from this tax credit back to HEBSAC.
Okay.
Like, HEBTech was using those tax credits to pay for the renovations, so it was all part of the plan.
Makes sense, but Miles is claiming no one told him that everyone had to follow those rules. He's saying other homeowners, ones who weren't African American, they got to keep that tax credit money. And, well, that's a serious accusation. How's HEBSAC responding to all this?
Oh, they have a completely different story. HEBTech here says there was absolutely no discrimination. They said every single homeowner signed that same agreement, no special treatment for anyone. And to prove it, they gave us a spreadsheet with all the home buyers and their info on the tax credit.
So are we saying it's a he said, she said situation already?
Pretty much. And we haven't even gotten to the warranty drama yet.
Oh boy, this is getting good.
Oh, it gets better. Miles says that his home repairs were constantly delayed, way more of a pain than what other homeowners experienced, which only made him more suspicious about discrimination.
Do we have any evidence to back this up? What do the documents say about these alleged differences in how repairs were handled?
That's the interesting part. We've got documents showing Miles asking for repairs back in 2018, not long after he moved in. He reported problems with everything, the tile, the air conditioning, even a leaky basement. He really documented it all.
Every homeowner's worst nightmare. So did HEBCAC just ignore him?
Not at first. They actually sent a contractor out to fix some of those initial problems. But then, as we get to 2019, things go quiet.
Interesting.
HEBCAC says they tried to set up times for more repairs, but Miles was either a no-show or just difficult to pin down.
Hold on. If I had a leaky basement and all these problems, I'd be hounding them for repairs. Something's not adding up here.
That's what's so intriguing, Ray. It got so bad that HEBCAC eventually withdrew their offer to help with repairs. They even accused Miles of basically stalling them on purpose.
But Miles is saying that HEBCAC wasn't being fair to begin with. He wanted to use his own contractors, but they refused. Makes you wonder if there was something else going on behind the scenes.
That's the question, isn't it? Was it just bad communication, different ideas about how things should be done, or something more deliberate? You've got these two sides, both feeling wronged, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
So we have Miles feeling like he's getting nowhere, and HEBCAC saying, hey, we tried. It seems like a big part of this hinges on whether HEBCAC really was treating everyone the same way like they're saying.
That's where this spreadsheet they gave us comes in. It's like we're getting a peek behind the curtain, financially speaking, at how they dealt with all the Station East homeowners.
Okay, let's put on our detective hats then. What does this spreadsheet tell us?
Well, it's got all the basics, addresses, names, dates, but, and this is kind of a big deal, they actually categorized homeowners by race.
Whoa. So much for everyone being on a level playing field, right? Like HEBCAC keeps saying, especially when it comes to those tax credit payments.
Exactly.
So if what they're saying is true, everyone should be paying those tax credits on time, right?
Yeah.
No exceptions. Let's see if the numbers back that up.
Right.
Okay, scrolling. Most people did pay, but there are definitely some who didn't. A bunch of entries say refused to pay. And guess who those are? Nicholas Miles, Stephanie Thomas, Shauna Fredericks, and Julian Smith.
Interesting. And if we look a little closer, all four of those homeowners are listed as African American.
Hold on. There are two other refused to pay entries. One is Caucasian and the other's Hispanic.
Good catch. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. We got more documents later, right? And HECAC's lawyer, they said that these two homeowners, they eventually paid their tax credits. But the thing is, the spreadsheet, it doesn't show that. It doesn't explain why they refused in the first place either.
So were these two homeowners given some kind of a break that the others weren't?
Right, like were they given more time, more leeway?
It feels like this spreadsheet just makes the whole thing even more complicated.
It really shows you can't just rely on one thing. We need more information, more context to really understand what was going on.
What else do we have?
Well, we have copies of all the back and forth between HEBCAC and the homeowners, mostly emails and letters, about those warranty repairs. Let's see if those give us any more clues.
Like putting together a puzzle, right? Each email a different piece. Where should we start?
Let's stick with Nicholas Miles for now. Remember, he was already reporting all those problems back in 2018, right after he moved in. He even sent pictures, descriptions, the whole 9 yards, talking about the tile, that AC, and that leaky basement.
Yeah, a complete nightmare. And what did HEBCAC say about all that?
Well, at first they seemed like they were taking care of it. They sent out a contractor for a few of the smaller issues. But then in 2019, it all kind of went silent.
Right, like those documents showed, HEBCAC says they tried to schedule those repairs, but Miles was never around or just impossible to get a hold of.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. And eventually, HEBCAC just gave up. They officially withdrew their offer to make any more repairs. They even accused Miles of just trying to make things difficult.
But, on the other hand, Miles is saying they were playing games. He said he wanted to use his own contractors and they wouldn't let him.
Right.
Plus, he felt like they were using the repairs as leverage to force him to pay that tax credit he was fighting.
And that makes you wonder about the rules around these warranty repairs. Like, what are they actually required to do?
Good point. Like, what are the HEBCAC's obligations and what are Miles's rights as a homeowner? Did HEBCAC have to let Miles use his own guys? Or could they say, nope, our contractors only?
I know. That's a tricky one.
And this is probably a super gray area, legally speaking. Luckily, we have those standard warranty agreements from the whole Station East project. They're in with the other documents.
Oh, perfect. Well, let's see what those say about all this.
Okay, scanning through a sample agreement, it all seems pretty typical. You've got your usual clauses about materials and stuff, all covered for a year after closing. Seems pretty standard.
But does it say anything about who actually does those repairs? Who gets to pick the contractor?
Not directly, no. It's more focused on the homeowner reporting any issues right away and, letting the builder in to actually do the work.
That makes sense, but that's where it gets fuzzy. Homeowners, legally, they often can use their own contractors, especially once that first year of warranty coverage is over.
But Miles was still within that first year, right?
That's right. Which means HEBCAC could have put their foot down about using their own people. But there are often things in those agreements that say homeowners can bring in outside contractors if the builder is really slow or messes up.
So this sounds like one of those situations where it totally depends on the specifics.
Exactly. It really highlights why clear communication and being willing to compromise is so important on both sides.
Couldn't agree more. But before we go too far down that road, what about those other homeowners who also had problems? What do they have to say? Did any of them mention discrimination or unfair treatment?
While these other homeowners don't specifically say they were discriminated against, they definitely seemed frustrated. It sounds like those repair delays were a recurring theme.
Like Stephanie Thomas. She was dealing with those constant roof leaks.
Yes, and it took them forever to get someone out there to fix it.
And then there's Shauna Fredericks. She had roof problems too, plus a leaky basement on top of it.
It's crazy. And then you've got Julian Smith. He was so fed up with waiting for them to fix things, he actually paid for his own inspector to come in and document everything.
Wow. Makes you wonder if HEBCAC was just in over their heads. Were they dealing with too many requests? Or was there something off about the quality of the renovations themselves?
Right, like were they just not equipped to deal with it all?
No.
Or was there a bigger problem?
Each new bit of information makes it harder to figure out what really happened. Maybe this wasn't just about one homeowner and his experience. Maybe there were problems with how HEBCAC operated. Or maybe it really was just a bunch of individual problems that snowballed into something bigger.
Right. And that's what makes these cases so hard to untangle. It's almost never a clear right and wrong.
Yeah.
It's usually a mix of different people's experiences, how the organization does things, and then those larger issues that are always present.
It's a good reminder to look at everything, to not just make assumptions, and to remember that bias can show up even when it's not super obvious.
Definitely. And to be fair to heavy tech, they did eventually say they would fix all the problems that were found in Miles's house, even though that initial warranty period had already ended.
Really? So was that them trying to make it right or just trying to avoid getting sued?
That's the million-dollar question. And the documents just don't give us a clear answer. It's one of those things we'll probably never know for sure.
That's so frustrating. There's always this element of what really happened, but we just don't know and probably never will. But it makes you think about how important legal action can be in these situations.
You're right. Sometimes just the idea of going to court can make people step up and actually fix things.
Like suddenly everyone wants to find a solution when they might have to face a judge.
Exactly. But it can also make things worse. Like it can make people even less likely to agree and find a solution.
A double-edged sword, for sure. And in this case, even though the lawsuit was dropped, it seems like it probably made things even more tense between HEBCAC and these homeowners.
Especially with that whole tax credit thing still up in the air.
Right. And we still haven't figured out exactly what happened there. Miles is totally convinced he was misled, that there were different rules for different people. But HEBCAC is sticking to their story. Everyone was treated the same.
So the question remains, was Miles right? Were there other homeowners who didn't have to pay? And if so, why? Was it really about race or something else entirely? These are the questions we need to keep asking as we keep digging through these documents.
So we're still trying to figure out this whole tax credit agreement. Was it really the same rules for everyone like HEBCAC says? Or was there something else going on?
It's like trying to solve a puzzle, but we don't have all the pieces. Remember, Miles was adamant that he was told others didn't have to follow those same rules. Like he was convinced that some people got to keep their tax credit money.
Right, and then there's that whole thing about HEBCAC releasing those liens on a couple of properties, including Miles, to help them refinance. Seems kind of nice of them at first, but...
Exactly. Because even though they released those liens, it didn't actually get rid of the homeowner's obligation to pay the tax credit money eventually.
Oh, I see what you mean. So it was more like a temporary fix, not a, like, you don't owe this anymore kind of thing.
Right. It was more like kicking the can down the road a little bit, not erasing the debt entirely.
So why even bother releasing the liens then if they were still going to have to pay the tax credit money later?
Well, HEBCAC said it was a show of good faith. You know, like they were trying to be flexible and help out homeowners who were struggling.
I get that, but it's easy to see why someone like Miles, already feeling suspicious, would see that and think, hold on, are they giving special treatment to some people and not others?
Totally. And we just don't have enough information to know for sure what their thinking was.
Yeah, it's all about perception, isn't it?
Mm.
The same action can look really different depending on how you see it. And this is where Miles's point about the deed rider is important to remember. You know, that document that spells out the tax credit agreement in black and white.
Right. The thing is, NGBCAC admitted that not all of the homeowners actually had that deed rider attached to their property.
Really?
Yeah, they said it was a mistake by the closing company, like a clerical error, nothing intentional.
I bet that explanation didn't go over very well with Miles, especially if he felt like they were already treating him differently.
I can see that. It's like, it's an honest mistake, or is it a way to get around the rules for some people? We just don't have the evidence to say for sure.
It feels like we keep hitting these dead ends, like we'll never know the full story.
And that's the thing about discrimination. It can be so hard to pin down. It's rarely about someone coming right out and saying, we're treating you differently because of your race.
It's more subtle than that, right?
Exactly. It's those little things, those systemic barriers that can create an unequal playing field. And that makes it incredibly hard to prove.
Makes you think twice about those everyday interactions and the systems we all have to deal with, doesn't it? So, after all of this, where does this leave us? What's the takeaway for our listeners?
For me, it's a reminder that we always have to question our assumptions and be aware of our own biases and always, always be ready to dig deeper.
Yeah, like this case showed, things are rarely as straightforward as they seem. Makes you think about what happens when those systems we rely on, you know, housing, banking, whatever, aren't actually fair for everyone.
It's a big question, right? And unfortunately, one that doesn't have an easy answer.
Definitely not.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, these aren't just abstract cases with a bunch of legal jargon. These are real people dealing with real-life consequences.
Exactly.
That's what makes these deep dives so important. We got to keep shining a light on these issues and asking tough questions. So, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been quite a journey, and we hope it's given you a lot to think about.